Hello and welcome to Tax Matters. I am Pearl Naimaka.
And I'm Chiamaka Ohaochi. How is business going? And we do hope you're paying your taxes.
There's always this talk about town and gown. Town referring to industry and gown referring to academic community.
The joy of every academic is for collaboration between town and gown, sharing of research findings and training industry workers, all aimed at making the society better by benefiting from the fruits of research work.
There are instances when you have a fusion of town and gown in an individual. Adeola Rahman Ikpaye was for a long time a university lecturer, plying his trade at the Department of Commercial and Industrial Law, Faculty of Law at the University of Lagos. He then made a move into politics, serving first as Special Advisor, Tax and Revenue Matters to the Lagos State government, and later as Attorney General for the state.
Today, Mr. Ade Ikpaye is the Deputy Chief of Staff to the President, Federal Republic of Nigeria.
We can say that Mr. Ikpaye has seen a lot.
You obviously don't want to say Mr. Ikpaye has seen it all.
Nobody sees it all. We learn every day.
Definitely.
On Friday, April 6, 2018, Mr. Ikpaye delivered the second public lecture of the Department of Commercial and Industrial Law, Faculty of Law, University of Lagos.
Topic was Funding Governmental Services in a Federation, the Inevitable Admixture of Law and Politics.
Oh, admixture sounds like Mr. Ikpaye himself.
Professor Ayo Asenora, Dean Faculty of Law, University of Lagos, captured the essence of town and gown collaboration in her opening remarks.
Universities usually hold public lectures. And what are public lectures that we're here gathered for today? What purpose do they serve? Public lectures provide universities or academic institutions an opportunity to interact with the public. We bring our scholarship, we bring the findings that emanate from our reflections, our empirical studies to the public lecture, and we disseminate. But for some time again, we have also moved away from just using public lectures as a platform to tell the world about what it is that we're doing. We have also embraced the town and gown meet. So we are no longer ivory towers that remain largely disconnected from the rest of the world. And so today we use public lectures as an opportunity also to bring practitioners, those who represent the town, those who use the end results of our researches to share with us their reflections, how they're using some of our contributions, the gaps that they have identified in practice, and from there we also derive research directions. It is for this purpose that the Department of Commercial and Industrial Law is holding this second annual lecture and has found it fit to invite those who are from the government in Nigeria to speak to us about the governmental perspectives that are shaping policy in Nigeria. And it is my joy to welcome, even on this occasion, Mr. Ade Ikpaye. Thank you very much.
Now to the lecture. The second public lecture of the Department of Commercial and Industrial Law was chaired by the former Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Oden Ajumogobia.
Today's lecture, Funding Governmental Services in a Federation, the Inevitable Admixture of Law and Politics, couldn't have come at a better time. An 18th century king, Frederick the Great, once said that no government can exist without taxation. This money must necessarily be levied on the people, and the grand art consists of levying so as not to oppress. In Nigeria, we haven't even got to the point of oppression. We just don't pay tax. And why? Because the government felt that, previous governments have felt that they had sufficient revenue from oil to fund all their needs. So we didn't bother about tax. and we didn't therefore hold the government accountable. They got money from wherever they got it and did whatever they could. But as we saw the oil price dip, not for the first time, but this time the oil markets had changed in a way that suggested that this was going to be a prolonged dip. It wasn't going to be just one of these cycles where we would go down and then go back up again and continue business as usual. And so this government has rightly made tax a very important priority. Now, funding in a federation is peculiar because the federation comprises the federal government and regional or local governments, as we have in Nigeria as well. And each of these governments have to fund their activities and provide services for the people. So this talk today is going to be a broad one that's going to naturally embrace the challenges of funding services in a federation where you have federal government revenues and state government revenues. The system of the federation allows the federal government, states, and even some local governments to levy taxes. So the states and local governments have the option of competing with each other by levying different levels of income, company, consumption, and other taxes. This is what happened in the First Republic, where the states, the regions, competed with each other. They raised revenues and developed at their own pace. Today, all the states go cap in hand to the federal government, except Lagos State. And when I said that we have an eminent speaker today, two of the people on the high table here, our guest speaker, Mr. Adekpai, and the chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, both grew Lagos State's revenue. As an example, I mean, Lagos State is way ahead of everyone else. Under our revenue allocation system, the federal government takes the lion's share, 52.68%. The states, 36 states, share 26.72%, and 774 local governments share 20.6%.
Mr. Ekpaye began by going down memory lane.
I left this great institution quite tentatively in 2001. And I say tentatively because it was then supposed to be on a 2-year leave of absence, 2 years only. That was when I was invited by the then Attorney General of Lagos State, formerly senior colleague in the faculty, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. And then he introduced me to Governor Tinubu, then of Lagos State, who appointed me as special assistant to the governor on legal matters, so I could work with Professor Osinbajo. So that was the beginning. Quite unknown to me, I was at that time bound for a career encapsulated more or less in the topic of today's lecture. My first assignment for Lagos State government, and that was before I left the faculty, was to bring up a legal opinion on the constitutional validity of the value-added tax decree of 1993, which had just transformed to become an act of the National Assembly by virtue of the 1999 Constitution. And Lagos State was wondering, because during the military, of course, the federal military government could make laws on any matter whatsoever. So there was really no demarcation of legislative competence as between federal or state legislatures. But now that we had the Constitution fully restored and the legislative powers demarcated, Lagos State was wondering what would be the fate of value-added tax, which we all thought strongly was supposed to be a state tax. But what is more important, even at that time, taxation and revenue matters had already seized the front row in government as the challenges of funding public services loomed large. We had just gone through about 16 years of military rule, and expectations were sky high. Perhaps an after effect of the vigorous political campaigns and exuberant promises that preceded the elections, democracy was assumed to hold the promise of utopia, a better health system, a more functional educational system, hugely well-maintained and expanded infrastructure, constant electric power, abundant water supply, etc. Politicians clearly felt pressured to deliver on the better life promise, and all boiled down to the quantum of revenue available to governments at all levels. Thus followed the inevitable admixture of law and politics as the harsh reality of resource scarcity dawned. Okay, everybody came in believing that, okay, we will have resources to do a lot, we have promised, and those promises were made without really appreciating exactly the resource limitations that were on ground, until, of course, the civilian government took over, and then the rush for revenue started.
The guest lecturer went on to explore government obligations against the background of the revenue available for the fulfillment of such obligations.
Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution provides simply that the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Very simple phrase. Security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. That is why governments are there, which means that the people are entitled to demand from government security and welfare. But then, this is a big deal because we are talking of 182 million individuals. So it's not security and welfare of a family of 5 or something like that, no. It's security and welfare of 182 million odd individuals, which is no mean feat. Security itself is multifaceted, transcending the services provided by the armed forces to include policing, enforcement of law and order, the entire court system, prison system, and so on and so forth. Even traffic control is all rolled in. Today, there is no aspect of these services that is not prone to the pervasive problem of resource limitation. If you come to welfare, then what strikes you first is our huge population. And it is said to be growing at the rate of 2.6%, so that even when you do a bit of infrastructure development, health, sanitation, educational services, you find that your target is always moving because the population is always growing. Okay, so you cannot say that, oh, now that we have what we have today, everything is fine, because tomorrow there will be more people needing even more services and resources. Unfortunately, as you all know, we have remained largely a mono-product economy. It is a policy of this administration to diversify now. And a lot is being done, for instance, in agri and solid minerals development and things like that. But the fact today is that we are still heavily dependent on oil and oil prices. Now, it is not, of course, always so, because taxation traditionally has been the mainstay of governments, okay? We say that taxation is an inherent, the power to tax is an inherent attribute of sovereignty. So once you have a sovereign government, the meaning of that sovereignty, or the implication, is that it must have a way of collecting monies. You can call it taxes, levies, charges, whatever, from the individuals within that polity, within that community, in order to fund common services. It's much like, okay, so we have a small community at Akoka here, and then there's a small community at Ikeja, and there is no way anybody, individual, is going to start building a road from Akoka to Ikeja. That must be done inherently by collective effort. So even in the olden days, in lieu of taxation, there was public service, compulsory public service. which is now replaced by money. So unless such activities are undertaken jointly by everybody contributing, they simply don't get done. And that has been the purpose of government, to do things that individuals would by themselves not have been able to achieve, to do things for the collective, which means that it must also get resources from the collective.
Every day, my people dey for work. Some dey do office work, some get them own business. So all of them want good road, constant power for better life. Oh, whether na office work, oh yeah, pay your tax. Whether na your own business, oh pay your tax. If you want a better life, oh pay your tax. Now your civic responsibility, pay your tax. Better soup, now money cook am. Oh yes. Nothing goes for nothing, my brother. If you want potable water, security and hospital for make life jolly.
That's right. Good roads, good hospitals, portable water, adequate security all come from taxpayers' money. Play your part in making Nigeria great. Everybody, small scale, big companies, entrepreneurs, do the right thing. Pay your tax. This message is from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS.
Mr. Adeibayo went on to speak on what he called the winning formula.
In the current scenario, it appears that the winning approach is to find ways of broadening the tax net, the tax base, and enforcing compliance. What I'm saying is, given the taxes that are enforced now at the rates that they bear today, how many people have we captured, and how effectively have we captured them? Because I believe that if we focus now on implementing what we have, on broadening the base, a lot of people, half of the taxpayers are outside of the net because we have a huge informal economy. You can make a lot of money, you can spend a lot of money without even coming across the taxman. Okay, so maybe the focus first should be there. Those that ought to be paying that are not paying, those that are paying much, much less than what they should be paying. If we focus on that for now, I think that takes us out of the argument of whether, okay, you need to impose more taxes to get more revenue, or you need to let the people be in order to allow the economy to be buoyant, to let people be able to do things for themselves. I know the FRS under Mr. Fowler has made tremendous progress in adding more taxpayers, bringing more taxpayers to the net. But he too will agree that there is still a lot more to be done in that regard.
The Voluntary Assets and Income Declaration Scheme also came up for mention.
And of course, you know of the Voluntary Asset and Income Declaration Scheme. That is VADES, introduced by the federal government through Ministry of Finance. And the whole idea is, okay, you've been a defaulter, you've had properties you've never paid tax on abroad and things like that. This is the time, regularize everything, no penalty, no imprisonment, no fine. Just do what you need to do and you are forgiven. And the period, I think, just recently expired. There had been some comments. I saw people trying to judge the scheme. Okay, has it been good or bad? No, I think that is missing the point. It is not to be judged by how much we've already got. Because even after the expiration of the period allowed, you are still supposed to do voluntary asset and income declaration anyway. It's going to be a way of life. It's going to continue. So that was just the beginning. That was just to ease the entrance into the tax system for a lot of people who had been out of it because they had kept their transactions under the table. We say now bring it on to the table, no questions asked. So I think we should take it easy and not try to draw judgments on the scheme yet, because what it is introducing is a way of life. And what I expect to follow is enforcement. Now, it was a period for voluntary declaration. Now, whether you declare or not, government has access to information about properties owned by Nigerians abroad and so on. Now, you will now be forced, if you didn't take advantage of the voluntary aspect, you will now be forced to do it. So it's a continuing business.
In conclusion, Mr. Adeibaye had this to say.
It's quite clear that even in the most advanced economies, revenues are never enough for all the services a government would like to offer the citizenry. In the quest to fund governmental services, countries incur huge debts, always with the hope of increasing revenue generation someday. In developing economies like Nigeria, the gap between the available infrastructure and services as compared to the ideal is far too wide. Hence the need to diversify and grow all available revenue resources. In a recovering economy such as ours, tax increases may be counterproductive, as I've said, and even more challenging to collect, because at a point people can just grow weary of it and damn the consequences, and you find that enforcement is also difficult. Hence, the focus should be on enforcing the existing laws and growing the list of compliant taxpayers. In the same vein, harmonization of existing taxes is essential across tiers of government. Constitution empowers the state legislatures to determine local government charges. Let me take a moment to deal with this. We always hear of multiplicity of taxes, that local government charges all sorts, and the solution we have in place now, except in Lagos State, where we have local government taxes and levies approved list for collection law of Lagos State. In other states, they still rely on a similar law of the federal government. Federal government does not have tax jurisdiction over local governments. The taxes and levies that a local government collect is to be determined by the House of Assembly of a state. So the solution is for states to take charge of their local governments, determine what they could collect. In Lagos at the time, we went even as far as to determine the rates, because that is the power of the State House of Assembly. And although we classified them, there are the urban areas, the semi-urban and rural areas, so there is not the same rates everywhere. But states have to take responsibility. And if we do this, it's going to be a tremendous improvement on our ease of doing business journey. Because, as I said earlier, people want certainty. Investors want to be sure what exactly is chargeable. Who am I to pay to? It is that certainty that I think states have an obligation to bring about. Otherwise, we'll be talking about multiplicity of taxes for ages and ages to come.
The question and answer session that followed provided ample opportunity for further amplification of issues at stake. This will come to you in a subsequent episode of the program.
Welcome back. There's big news coming from the CITN, and that is the election of 2 new members into the Council of the Institute, as well as the return of 3 current members. On Wednesday, June 6, 2018, the CITN held its 26th annual general meeting, at which, amongst other things, the results of the electronic voting of members into the Council of the Institute were released.
The main objective of the scrutineers was to conduct elections into the seats that will become vacant due to the retirement of 5 members of Council at the end of today's proceedings. At the end of the election process, the results in respect of the 15 members of the Institute who presented themselves for election and were approved by Council are as follows. 1. Agbelui Olusola Samuel. Membership number 6808. Vote received 1,206. 2. Akanibo Elamina Clement. Membership number 5363. Votes received 258.
3 old members were re-elected into council: Mr. Samuel Agbeluyi, Mrs. Justina Okoro, and Mr. Benjamin Omonayajo. While 2 new members emerged, Mr. Kabir Muhammad Umar and Mr. Otajiri Orienru.
Earlier in his address, the President and Chairman in Council of the CITN, Chief Cyril Ede, reeled out his numerous achievements of his first year in office. These include giving greater value to the CITN's membership certificate, stamp and seal, and actualization of the Institute's Tax Academy.
Effective January 2019, all tax filers for a consideration must be members of CITN with CITN stamp and seal.
Congratulations to the new council members of the Institute. More grease to your elbows. And to our viewers, see you next week.
Thank you for watching and have a great week ahead.